Hi folks, this is another Florida Man Diplomacy Talleyrand video, and what follows is the German postmortem. This postmortem, it should be noted, was recorded before the end of the game, so there is some speculation in it about how the game would end. I did want to get your thoughts on the game we played, well, not that we played, the game that you played as Germany, and your post-mortem evaluation of the game, of your play, of the other players, and of any lessons or ideas you think you might have garnered from this game.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, I think my biggest mistake was thinking that you can extrapolate too much from the build. Because I sort of was like, well, if France builds a fleet in Marseille, that means I'm good to go against Russia. And that turned out not to be true.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I see what you mean. Yeah, in winter 1903, France did build in Marseille. He built a fleet, and you built two armies. And after that, Russia looks pretty weak here in the center, so it did look like you'd be good to go against Russia.
Right. I mean, that was that was the consequential turn where I was like, maybe France will stab me. Maybe I should convoy Eddie to Holland. Maybe I should hold out and not go against Russia. But it was the fleet build in Marseille that I was like, all right, France plausibly could go against Italy here. I mean, potentially that's what, obviously the route he took worked out well for him. But in the moment, it felt like we get along so far so well.
Yeah.
Maybe he will.
You know, in retrospect, do you think France made the right decision in going after you, or do you think he actually should have just gone for Italy?
You know, it's hard to say. Because obviously going after me worked out.
Going after you did result in him, eventually defeating you. But I do think, Italy was kind of vacillating this whole time, going back and forth in the Mediterranean. And if France had gone after Italy at that point, I think there's a decent chance he would have beaten Italy. And then if he could go after you after beating Italy, then he would have soloed.
This is true, actually.
And
right.
Now I'm not sure he will.
No, it does look like they put up a line. So.
Yeah. The only thing is if Russia breaks the line, because Russia is able to choose whether France wins or not, although right now it doesn't seem as if Russia is going to choose to throw the game to France.
Well, I mean, by any scoring system, it's better to be in the draw than to lose to a solo. So
yes,
it would make no sense for Russia to throw to France at this point, because however you look at it, they lose, whereas if they're in the draw, they...
Rationally, that's true. But, the Russian player, I could see the grudge between him and Italy, and the fact that Italy and Turkey have just repeatedly ticked Russia off. He might throw, because France is the one who's been nicest to him out of the surviving players.
That's what's interesting about this game, right, is that the emotions play so strongly.
I think if diplomacy was a game of pure reason, it would just be chess.
I mean, isn't that right?
Yeah. Because diplomacy, it is an emotional game. It's about trust and playing the other people as much as anything else. And, Italy pretty clearly tried to take Russia out, and Turkey joined with him in that, and I would not be surprised if Russia held a grudge. We will see if Russia values revenge as much as or less than he values surviving in the game.
Mm-hmm.
But what else do you think you took from this experience?
It's definitely been fun to be able to have someone to reflect to in real time, and sort of codify where I'm at, because usually it's sort of like, here's how I'm feeling, but I don't necessarily reflect on the moment in as much detail.
I agree. It's if you have someone to talk to, or if you keep a journal, I feel like that adds a layer of depth to your own thought processes.
Yeah, the question that you kept asking, or you would ask interesting questions that I hadn't quite, thought out completely. What actually do I expect to happen? Yeah, I have some expectations, but if I have to put it out in a concrete way, what really am I expecting to happen? Or if I was in this other player's shoes, what would I do? Sure, I've thought about that, but actually, what would I do? So having to sort of give more concrete answers to those questions out loud or on paper, as you mentioned, I think is interesting. Is an interesting, helpful exercise.
But I'm glad you found it helpful too.
Yeah.
And I always have to watch out when I'm playing. I always have to watch out for, if I start to think what will this player do, or what would he do? And if a lot of the time you accidentally slip into, or I accidentally slip into, thinking, what do I hope he does, or something like that.
Or the opposite case of like, what do I fear most that he will do, and so I assume that's what's going to happen, even though that maybe has a 10 or 20% chance of actually being the course of action. But because I see this terrible possibility that could ruin the game for me, I'm going to let that paralyze me and not take the risk that I need to actually progress.
I agree. I think that's a good point. That's the flip side of that coin.
Exactly. But there is a lot of guesswork involved. That's undeniable.
Yeah. It's not, because just like we were saying, it's not all pure self-interest. It's not France does some mental calculations that he determines the potentiality of gain for attacking Germany versus attacking Italy. I don't really think that's how he thought about this.
No. Right. I mean, yeah, I don't know how he made the decision, so I'm interested to hear.
I do think it was because he thought that Italy would be a harder target. And
I mean, that is fair. I mean, I have seen many of France and Italy just sort of get stuck.
I do think that there's a good chance that's what would have happened to him, because looking at this Winter 1903 map, even though he built that fleet in Marseille, Italy had an Ionian fleet, a Tunisian fleet, and a Naples fleet. So I think, I don't know, maybe France would have been able to break through that, but I think that could have taken a while or been impossible to do. It depends really on how Turkey manages to stay involved, but at that point it looked as if Russia was going to finish off Turkey with Italian help.
True. This is a thought that just occurred to me, but I was trying to get Italy to play against France and France to play against Italy, and I thought that conflict would be beneficial to me. But I'm thinking now, what if I had actually played down the French threat to Italy? So Italy was more likely to leave themselves open to France, meaning that France was actually more likely to go after Italy.
That could have worked, or it could have worked even if you played it down. It could have worked on Italy in a different way. It could have worked like reverse psychology. Italy thinks the German-French alliance wants to lower my guard, and so he goes after France because of that. So it's interesting. I think, having had conversations with the Italian player, I do think he's the kind of cautious person who might become very suspicious of that.
Yeah, I played with him. I think this is my third game with him, because I figured out sort of who he was based on. It's funny, the little things, like he capitalizes every territory. And just that, and the rapport we had felt similar to other rapports. I was like, I think it's probably him.
Interesting.
And so I felt like I could trust him. But sometimes that's a bad thing, is when you feel like I trust this person to the point that I'm not going to maybe, I don't know, be as manipulative or be as, I don't know.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, if you look back, and I'm sure you can see it looking back, and I'm sure I remember you saw it at the time, Italy really could have saved your bacon. Italy, if he had pulled an attack on France when you needed him to, you'd probably still be around. And we go through the seasons, and there are times when Italy is, let me see, Italy is here in Tyrolia, and he can help with his unit in Tyrolia and his unit in Silesia. He could have helped you hold Munich for a long time, if not indefinitely. Yeah. I think it would have even been beneficial to him to do that, because he'd started a fight with Russia and brought Turkey back from the dead, which I think bringing Turkey back from the dead was probably a mistake, but he'd started a fight with Russia at that point, and could ill afford to have France advancing against you while he's fighting Russia, because he wants to take Russia out before France gets there, not the other way around. But here he vacates Tyrolia and moves to Vienna, and I looking at it, I couldn't for the life of me figure out why he would abandon his ability to defend Munich with you. So yeah, I think at a lot of moments it seemed to me that Italy just didn't really think about you as a useful ally or something. I don't know.
In retrospect, it does feel that way. He sort of saw me as just sort of a pawn to put a little bit of pressure here and there. But I didn't do, to my, if I'm being honest with the criticism of myself, at this point in the game, I'd sort of given up, which, is not the best attitude, but that was sort of where I was at, where I was like, I don't really think I can make a comeback. I'm just going to support myself where I can. If Italy wants me to be useful, I'll try to be useful. But I didn't really push Italy and say, no, you have to keep me alive. You have, and maybe if this was a tournament game and I felt like, oh, I need a couple points to, do well, I would have but I've been playing in Nexus and I had like, several other games going. So at this point it was like, all right, I'm just not good. This is not my game.
It's very fair of you to give that flip side of the coin as to Italy's attitude toward you, because like I hadn't really considered how your attitude toward your own survival might have affected his thinking.
Yeah.
It's a good point. If somebody's given up, then their ally really has to decide, am I going to fight very hard for this person who's given up? Am I going to abandon him? Or I like to sometimes try this third option. Am I going to try and inspire him and instill in him the fire to keep on fighting, and we'll hold out together?
There was a little bit of that, but it wasn't to the extent of like, you're going to make it. It's like, well, if you do this, maybe you can kill a Russian unit, which happened at one point, because my final blaze of glory was disbanding a Russian unit because we both could only retreat to Bohemia.
Oh yes. I think I see that here in spring 1908. That was Italy was like, why don't you do that? And I was like, I have nothing better to do. I might as well. Yeah, because I can see from the layout here that you were not going to dislodge. You're not going to dislodge France from Munich. And anyway, there was literally nowhere else for you to retreat, and nowhere else for Russia to retreat either.
I think that was done on purpose, but it wouldn't have really mattered if I'd retreated to Tyrolia or something, because
it looks like Italy moved Venice in there.
Yeah, right. But say that they hadn't.
Right. It wouldn't have really mattered because like France had just too many units surrounding Munich at that point.
Right. There was another turn where I could have maybe held out, and that was the turn that Austria ruined it again for me. Where I actually had a chance at coming back.
Yes, I do see that where you were.
This staple turn right here. I'm still pretty mad about this, but not really. Like, doesn't really matter. But if I think about this turn, I'm a little mad.
I understand. Games where I get harmed in this way by other players' vindictiveness just tick me off too.
Right, and I don't know that Austria knew what he was doing. I don't know. I assume he probably didn't predict quite what would happen. I just think he was trying to cause trouble. Maybe.
That's a fair argument, I would say. I mean, like, the more natural thing for him to do would seem to be to move into Vienna.
Right.
But
he knew that we knew, and so he was like, nope, screw you all.
Yeah, I'm just going to be contrary because I know you guys aren't going to let me have that center.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then the other thing maybe to talk about is what happened when France finally moved those armies that were lying in wait in on me, which happens maybe in 2 turns. No, there it is.
Spring 1906.
So before this, I was basically like, France and I had been saying, well, I can fight Russia for you. I can be useful. And then at this point, I was sort of like, you have all these armies. You're going to attack me, right? And France was sort of gave a denial. And I could have not pushed it, but I was just like, no, you're going to attack me. Just admit it. And I sort of pushed it a little bit. And so I don't know if he was. I assume he probably was, because why wouldn't he?
I think if I were France, I would have at least considered using you as the vanguard or something to attack Russia, because if you had successfully taken Warsaw and Moscow, you'd basically be holding them in trust for France. Mm-hmm. And he could take Denmark and Kyle off of you so that you wouldn't be able to grow from it. But you'd also have those centers and be in this position to maybe even grab Sevastopol and maybe 1 or 2 Italian centers. At least I'm thinking you could be useful to him still. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if I would have taken you out, considering that he had all those armies there that he could use to pressure you into doing his bidding.
Right. So but he didn't try to do that really.
No, and he also didn't try to take Scandinavia, which I kind of understand. He was trying to stay on somewhat good terms with Russia, I suppose, because everyone else was fighting Russia.
Just as I didn't want to fully commit to France because I still saw Italy as a friend, despite, in retrospect, the fact that you could have done more, Italy. You could have done more to help me. and
mm-hmm.
Maybe Italy could have soloed if they'd been more aggressive.
I did. I think I may have mentioned this to you, but for the longest time, I considered Italy the favorite to solo until I felt like, until this thing of him resurrecting Turkey. And I thought, well, that's an interesting decision. You're going to stab Turkey, you're going to stab Russia and resurrect Turkey. And I guess I get it, because he's been having trouble in his negotiations with Russia. But, that's a hard thing to do, to resurrect a country that I would consider to be Italy's natural enemy. And he ends up basically taking a center off of Italy here and getting Romania and getting a Russian center of Sevastopol, building 2 fleets, and now if not for France being this big solo threat, Italy would just be under attack by Turkey, I'm confident. So Italy is basically saved from that decision by the fact that France is a solo threat, but he only made the decision because he wanted to go after Russia.
Because he didn't like Russia.
Yeah, it was. I think it was. I think it was largely a personal decision based upon difficulty between them getting along. And I'm not going to say that that's wrong to do, because I know I've made decisions on a similar basis, and I know Russia was asking him for stuff that Italy didn't want to give up. I'm sure you're probably aware of that too, because Russia forwarded all of the press. So
that certainly didn't help their relationship.
Well, no, he did it after Italy stopped him. but no, it didn't help the relationship. And I also don't think that forwarding all of the press between you and another player to everyone is usually a good move.
No, because I didn't even read it, like most of it. I sort of skimmed it. Like, if there's something specific that you want me to read,
forward that one message.
Exactly, and then I'll actually read that message as opposed to everything and being like, okay, this looks fine.
Yeah, I personally don't have any particular horror of the etiquette of message forwarding, but I do think that when you do it, there are definitely more effective ways to do it, and you've just kind of nailed it. Mm-hmm. The good thing about message forwarding is, in a normal message, I could just tell you what another player is saying. I could say that, and I could say that in my own words, and you could believe me or not believe me. But if I forward you a message from another player, and it has their writing style, you can kind of tell. You can kind of decide whether or not you really believe that's their writing style, and that might give a good amount of extra weight to whatever it is I'm arguing. So I do think message forwarding has its place, in other words, is what I'm saying, but I don't think it was used the way we probably would have here.
I forwarded a message or two from either France to Italy or Italy to France, hoping that would spark some sort of conflict, but no dice.
Yeah, you got to try whatever tools you have at your disposal, but I get it. It didn't work,
the danger is that you do forward something and then it doesn't pan out, and then you're suddenly, okay, now I just don't trust you.
Yeah. A lot of players in this game, I feel, tried things that just really didn't work out. But, it's always nice to see what people try. It's always interesting. I think that the Italian way of thinking and the French way of thinking, the Turkish way of thinking, the Russian way of thinking, your way of thinking, and even the Austrian way of thinking were all pretty interesting, although Austria got taken out much more quickly than anyone else.
Unnecessarily, I maintain.
I do think that I do think he could have lived longer. I know that player is pretty strong in other contexts, and I was a little disappointed to learn that he had stopped communicating with everybody, although I kind of understand, because at that point he was under attack by everyone. And
I sent him a message the turn before he got stabbed by everybody. It was like, hey, you're about to get stabbed by everybody, because as Germany, I didn't want to see that happen, like, full out, and no response.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he just wasn't into the game that much.
Which is fine. I still don't understand that opening, though.
Yeah,
which was sort of the source of our dysfunction in our relationship. Like, I understand it in principle if you think that Italy is going to hold in Venice.
Or if you think Italy is going to move Venice to Trieste.
Right, absolutely. So, like, I understand this as an opening, but I don't know what we said between Italy and Austria individually, but together we had all talked about the possibility of doing a central triple.
Yeah.
And everybody seemed to be on the same page about it.
And in truth, I should note, I think that the Central Alliance, I think it's actually a pretty powerful alliance. I'm going to make a video about that pretty soon, but I think that it's kind of an underrated and powerful concept.
Absolutely. I haven't had a lot of success getting people to do it. Something always goes wrong in terms of the personalities or what people want. But I agree that in theory, it's one of those things. When it works, it really, really works. When it doesn't, it's interesting. It was an interesting game. I think I think there are a few other ways it could have gone, obviously. Yeah.
But I think the combination of Austria and Italy's chemistry together was a real problem.
Well, yeah. I mean, and then after it happened, Austria tried to defend it as being on purpose. Oh, this is so I can disband my fleet and build an army. But that makes no sense, because if you go for Greece and Serbia, mm-hmm. you have 5 units instead of 4, and you still have 4 armies.
Yeah.
And so I pointed that out, and Austria didn't take kindly to that. And that was sort of the end of our relationship, which I don't understand because I don't think I'm wrong.
I don't think you're wrong either, and I think Austria just didn't like the fact that his excuse was called out in this case, because I don't think it was anything but an excuse. I do think it's like, I think if he had discussed that idea and Italy got mad because he just forgot that Austria brought that idea up, then it would have been a good excuse for a move to Venice. But my understanding is that he never did bring that up until after the fact.
No, right. And if you want to play, what's it called, the
Southern Hedgehog?
Southern Hedgehog, right, exactly. Yeah. And I think, and you want to have a good relationship with Italy, I think you probably ought to tell Italy, hey, we're doing a balance.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I think so too. Yeah. And the cautious, almost to the point of paranoia, Italian player, the very cautious Italian player, I should say, the very cautious Italian player was not at all happy to be surprised in this way. And so the impression I have of having spoken with him on multiple occasions in those early years, the impression I have was that nothing Austria could have done after that would have patched that relationship. Was that he was going to kind of let Austria make it up to him and then just keep on attacking him if Austria had been willing to make it up to him. Right. So I do think that there's a very real likelihood that Austria was doomed as soon as he made that mistake.
That's the problem with lying in 1901, is that once that bridge is burned, it's really hard to patch it over. That's
true. I think that there's another player who suffered in a more low-key way from burning a bridge in 1901. You know who I'm talking about?
Who are you talking about?
Turkey.
Oh.
Yeah, he moved into...
Oh, right, to Armenia. Yes, I was looking everywhere but Turkey. I was like, who is he talking about? Yeah, obviously.
As Turkey, I'm fond of moving to Armenia if I'm ever interested in attacking Russia, certainly.
But not to go back to Smyrna in the fall.
Yeah, he went back to Smyrna, and he thought that would kind of make up with Russia. But, I could tell from messages with Russia, and you can tell from subsequent moves that Russia is having none of it. Mm-hmm. He is not interested in making up. He builds a new fleet in Sevastopol. It's a big declaration of war. And I think that this was a big mistake for Turkey and Russia, a big turning point in their game, because I think Turkey, it turns out, made a big mistake by opening against Russia, made another mistake by trying to make up with Russia, and Russia made a mistake in holding a grudge against Turkey, because Russia's trying to fight a war with Turkey and Austria at the same time. And it's just incredibly ineffective because he doesn't have the power to do that. He's got 4 units against their 7. And Italy is helping himself and Germany, but Russia's gaining very little. And you see that Russia's growth is very slow. Look, it's the end of 1903, and still all he has in the south is Romania. And that is not a good tempo of Russian growth. Whereas Italy has as many centers as Russia, and is obviously about to get Serbia because Austria destroys the Serbia army. So Italy is in great shape, actually, in terms of his growth at this point. But yeah, I think it was a big mistake for Russia to try and fight both of them, and it's clear that Austria was going to be dogpiled by Italy, and possibly by you, but Russia didn't have to kind of pile on there. He could have been Austria's ally. Mm-hmm. And he instead chose to fight Austria and Turkey and assume he'd be given some gains from by Italy later. And he even helped Germany get into Vienna, I think. He and Italy both supported Bohemia to Vienna. They both supported you into Vienna. And that's just not a good recipe for...
No, I honestly actually don't think I should have taken Vienna.
I don't think you should have either.
I think I was tempted by the dot, and it was promised maybe for helping against Austria on another turn, but they just put me out of position.
I don't think having an army in Vienna in 1903 is ever really a good thing for Germany.
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't think more about that. I was just sort of like, ha! I get another build, great.
I mean, I guess it could be a good thing if France was heavily committed south and you were heavily committing to the east. If you're heavily committing to the east and France is actually very loyal to you, then I guess I could see it.
Well, I was heavily committing to the east. France, however, was not committing south, and therein lies the problem.
Well, that's true. That's a good point. And France had way too many armies. France had as many armies as you. France should have been heavier on fleets if he was committing south. And also, he has all of his units in the north. All of them are clustered in the north.
That should have been a bigger sign, probably.
Yeah, I think so, because that's the way I would move if I were about to stab you too.
Again, seeing what you want to believe versus actually seeing what's there.
Yeah, and there's the element of hindsight. You're in the moment, and it's hard to be simultaneously planning for your own attack and planning with the expectation of being attacked.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you can really generally only do one or the other, but every diplomacy player wants to be on the attack. So planning defensively is hard to do when you're not actually under attack.
Case in point.
Yeah. I do think that you were playing a good game. You clearly had a decent relationship with Italy. He and Russia were both willing, even though it's clearly against Russia's interests, both willing to see you get Vienna. And the reason why I keep harping on Russia's interests being against that is because I think that a couple reasons. One, that should be a Russian center. That should clearly be a Russian dot. Vienna, Budapest, Romania. In a wintergreen or a juggernaut alliance, those three centers should generally be Russian, in my view. And two, having finished my Basics of Russia and Basics of Germany videos, I have come to the conclusion that Russia and Germany are natural enemies, and that any alliance between them is really just one of them cozying up to the other so that they can stab.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that Russia, if you hadn't been stabbed by France, Russia's just asking for trouble by making a strong Germany. Because if France had waited another year before stabbing you, you would have had Warsaw and probably Moscow. And Russia would have been done. Even more done than he actually ends up being.
Yeah.
Which is, funny. He actually ends up, he's survived so far. He'll probably survive to the end game now. But that's just purely because of France's decision. It's not because of Russia's diplomacy. And I think that was a mistake. Him joining forces with you guys against Austria, who I don't think Austria ever actually attacked him. No, Austria never attacked him. Maybe in fall 1901, I think he was supporting Bulgaria to Romania or something. Oh yeah, he was. Austria thought he was going to work with Turkey against Russia. But
it would have made sense for both of them, given who their friends were.
Yes, it would.
Who their enemies were.
Yeah, Austria thought he was going to work with Turkey against Russia, and it would have made sense given who their enemies were. But Turkey thought that he had made up with Russia, so he kind of backed off of Russia and tried to be friendly with Russia again, which, ultimately turned out to have been a mistake. Russia was holding a grudge.
It's a difficult decision knowing you're in the direction you're attacking somebody and knowing when to hold off. Because you want to have the momentum and say, see, I beat you, I know, I killed you off, but that's often not actually in your long-term advantage.
Who are you referring to here, by the way? But I agree with you.
I'm referring to myself in another game that I'm thinking of, but here, potentially actually with England.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Maybe if I'd tried to keep England alive but not strong, that would have been a good counterbalance to the power of France.
Maybe. I think that's a fair point. I
don't know if there was a moment where that actually could have happened, but
I think as soon as France moved heavily against England, you probably could have turned on France. In this season of spring 1902, you probably could have moved. You definitely could have moved Munich into Burgundy.
Mm-hmm.
What is that? What is that nonsense Belgium's doing? You could have moved Munich into Burgundy, Kiel to Helgoland, which is what you did. You could have warned England that he was about to be attacked by France and had him move Edinburgh to Clyde. England's moves here are kind of opening him up to being attacked by France. And so it's no surprise that this ends up the way it did. And there is, I think, another little mistake that was made here in the fight with England, although it's an easy mistake to make, I think, and that is that France got almost all of the gains.
Mm-hmm.
So typically, I think of the gains from fighting England are Edinburgh, Liverpool, London, and Belgium. Those are the gains for France and Germany, because Russia is definitely going to take Norway. So I don't consider that as up for grabs. But France ends up getting Liverpool, London, and Belgium.
And so the plan was that I was meant to get London and Edinburgh. Yeah. But France ended up being there for strategic reasons, and it was like, oh, you'll get it later, but we all know how that played out.
Yeah.
But there was nothing I could do to force it, really, at this stage, so I just sort of had to, Or maybe there was. Maybe I could have been stronger than that.
I don't know. It's an interesting question. I think if my ally of France was this advanced this quickly against England, it would be tough. It would be tough because with all those units there, he could come after you.
Or to at least ask for Belgium. That might have been one,
I think so. And even if you didn't, even if he refused to give it to you and refused to give you London, I would have just attacked Belgium, I think. I would have attacked Belgium and put my North Sea fleet there.
You couldn't really defend it because, well, he could, but he wouldn't.
You said he could, but he wouldn't?
Well, I mean, if he wanted to use the English Channel for that purpose.
Oh, yeah, you're right. He could, but he wouldn't. That's why I was saying if I were you, I probably would have. I think maybe if I didn't think I was going to get London, I would have attacked Belgium and moved Denmark into North Sea, moved North Sea into Belgium, supported by Holland, Kyle Rohr, Bohemia back to Munich. And, you probably are going to have some trouble making progress against France, but you're going to get at least one build from this. Mm-hmm. And England's not dead, so he can provide a little help. And if you can persuade Russia to not do anything or to join on your side, move Norway into Norwegian Sea, and maybe you can get Italy involved. I'm seeing there are some options for you to knock France back or knock France out, although Italy's probably not going to be involved looking at this. He's probably going to stay focused on Austria because he's started a fight with Austria that he needs to finish. But everyone else can help you.
Yeah, right. I mean, it wasn't doomed. I think in the back of my head is something I read somewhere where it says, like, Germany is best served if they can eliminate countries quickly because they're so central.
I think that's probably true. I think ideally for Germany, you'd end up basically occupying a corner position by virtue of having knocked out England and or France.
Exactly.
I've never seen a German solo where Germany doesn't get centers from both England and France. So, I don't know. It's interesting. Germany's a hard position. It's, I don't think it's as hard as my hardest countries are Italy and England, but
really, those are some of my favorite countries.
That's interesting. Different.
Not always. Not the times when it sort of fizzles out really fast, but when it works, I find it really satisfying.
I find I have the kind of mouth that tends to attract punches. When I play as England, my very punchable way of communicating tends to get me knocked out.
Yeah, I don't know. It's always interesting who decides to go after whom based on those initial discussions and why they make those decisions. Yeah. And this, as Germany, my default is sort of I should maybe kill England because that feels like the biggest threat. But I could be persuaded otherwise.
That's tended to be my default as Germany too. Recently, I've had some people make a compelling argument to me that France is as good of a target, maybe better, but I still do tend to think that, like, for either France or Germany, England is scary up in that corner there, looming over you, plotting.
With all those fleets that they're going to build if they get anywhere.
Yes, that's how I feel. If England gets past the early game, gets control of Scandinavia, gets St. Petersburg, destroys all the Russian fleets, if there was ever more than one, if Russia does that, and he has not been eliminated, because, well, if he's done that, he hasn't been eliminated. If he's done that, then whoever was his Western ally is someone he can probably take out at his leisure, because all those Russian units, or all those English units, are hovering above either Germany or France. And I've flayed as England, and if I get that far, my experience has been that France and Germany will have trouble getting rid of me. Whichever one of them's left will have trouble getting rid of me, even with a surprise attack.
Yeah, that's what I like about playing England, is that aspect of it. But the fact that it's rare, I don't know.
That is what I like about playing England too. I just find the early game is so precarious and scary for me when I play England. But
that's how I feel about Austria, which I've heard you say is your favorite power.
I do like Austria a lot, and I think I tend to find that as Austria, I feel like Austria has more stopping power than England does. As long as Austria has at least one neighbor who's not attacking him, Austria can survive. That's how I feel, because the typical problem for Austria is that the juggernaut attacks him. And maybe if Italy's foolish, he jumps in. And a lot of the time, that will take an Austrian out. But with strong diplomacy, with a lot of communication, Austria is a powerhouse, I would say. And Austria is one of those countries that's equipped to get 2 builds in 1901. And England almost never does, because people don't like to let them have Belgium or Denmark or Holland. So I think they have a similar sort of weakness in that they can be dogpiled early on, but Austria has some strengths that England doesn't have. I mean, England has some strengths Austria doesn't have too. All those sea spaces around England are kind of a strength, but I think I like the land.
That's interesting. I think England can hold out longer. You know what I mean? Like against a sea lion, England can maybe still be putting up a little bit of a fight in 1903, if, depending on how things go.
I think if they play it poorly.
Yeah. I mean, you have to get lucky. That's true.
Yeah, as England, I've prided myself on staying alive a long time, but I'd rather get beaten fast.
Just let them go to bed, yeah.
Yeah, I'd rather get beaten badly or be a big winner, and I feel like Austria is my country for that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and England is my country that, like, sometimes I win as England. I've had solos as England, a few, but mostly I feel like England is a country that can get knocked around because other countries use suspicion and not unwarranted distrust, and I think it's just going to have trouble growing early on, which is the same issue I have with Italy. It's just when you have that trouble getting your start in the game.
Though I think Italy, in some ways, if they just kind of hang back, maybe France is busy with Germany or England. Who knows what? If you hang back for a couple of years, you can still sort of weasel your way into something depending on how the board is. But you got to get lucky. That's I don't know. That's
the unfortunate thing about Italy is that a lot of Italy's success, I've found, depends on just what the other players do.
Right.
To a greater extent than for any other country, because if other players are messing around with each other in whatever way, I usually can find some way to grow as Russia, as Austria, as Turkey. But Italy, I think as Italy, you kind of have to shake the box yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You have to shake things up until they come up the way you want, because sure, you can wait around, and it's likely that you won't get attacked because you're not part of either the Western Triangle or the Eastern Triangle. So unless there's a Western Triple, the West isn't going to attack you, and unless Austria's already been eliminated or Austria is part of some weird alliance, Austria's not going to attack you, and Russia and Turkey probably won't attack you until Austria's gone. But I feel like that's sitting and waiting to die, and that's scary too, in a different way.
Yeah, if you're not growing, you're losing.
If you're not growing, you're slowly dying, exactly. Yeah. So as Italy, and I'm going to make my Basics of Italy video and release it soon. As Italy, I feel like you're slowly dying as long as you're not growing, so I advocate for early attacks on anyone who you can make vulnerable, and I advocate for really aggressive, active diplomacy. See if you can get England and Germany to attack France, and if they do, then you can attack France with them. Or
I've soloed as Italy a couple times, and both times we attacked France right off the bat.
I think that's Italy's strongest play, if you can make it happen. Because France is really the biggest threat.
Mm-hmm.
Because France has just so much potential, and most of it by way of the sea.
But the danger is that you launch an attack against France. France manages to convince one of them, or the attack doesn't go off, and then suddenly you abandon the East, and now Turkey is on your other front, and
Italy just has to make a choice. I think you have to commit hard against either France or Turkey, because those are your two great threats. And if you eliminate one within the first few years, then you'll have enough strength to defend against the other, and turn west or east as you need to. But I do think you have to be very sure of having allies. If Italy doesn't have England and Germany clearly on his side against France, just don't bother. Or if Italy can't get Russia to attack Turkey with him, then maybe you. I hate to do this as Italy, but then maybe you have to attack Austria.
It's tricky.
I really don't like to do that, but sometimes I think it's the only choice.
Right. But if Austria is already dying, do you speed it up or do you try to buffer it out?
See, this is the part where it actually is painful to be Italy, because your whole plan is defending a dying power because he's your buffer. And it's not fun to be in that position. Russia and Turkey are working together. You know that they're eventually going to get to you. You're just fighting to be the last person eaten off on Cannibal Island.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's not much you can do.
Is there anything else you wanted to tell your adoring fans about this game, or about your thoughts on the game of diplomacy?
I don't know. I learn a lot every game I play, and I think I'm just trying to be better and better, and so like the takeaway from this game is, and other games that is trust your gut when you feel like somebody's going to stab you. They probably are, especially if their pieces are in a position to do so. They probably are that way for a reason. And don't be dissuaded by a clever build that is inclined to put you at ease without actually seeing where that's going.
Yeah. I think that's a good note. If the position on the board makes the hairs in the back of your neck stand up, pay attention to that.
Yeah, exactly.
I hope you've enjoyed these videos and this series as a whole. I know some people will be disappointed in the way it all came to an end, but I hope that the multiple perspectives will give it a lot of rewatch value and help each of the players who participated in it and those who watched it to improve their play in the future. If you liked this, I hope you'll like and subscribe and check out more of my diplomacy-related content. Until next time, Florida Man out.